So to actually cut an octagon, you just set your table saw blade at 45 and you space it out from the long edge of your blank and run it through 4 times. Boom, got yourself one of them there octagons. Okay, we've got it all set up right now to work on the bottom insert for the box. Now, as you guys saw in the earlier video, unfortunately, I lost all of the inserting this little part into the bottom for the hidden compartment. So this is going to be part 2, and I'm having to start from scratch and refilm here. So right now we've got our little insert here, which we'll fine tune a bit. Oops, I got some sawdust in it. So we got 2 pieces, and it's going to come in and twist, and we're going to set up a little grain match on the bottom for our combination so we know where to line it up, because if you don't get it just right, pulling it in and out is going to be very difficult. So I'm going to start out by just rounding this off. As you guys saw earlier in the video, I went in and turned it into an octagon just to save some of the corners, make it quick. There should be a little voiceover. I'm thinking out loud right now, so forgive me. I probably do a little voiceover on how I do the octagon. Super simple to take a square piece of wood and make it an octagon. Just take some of the time it takes to get it round off. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire her up, turn this round, and then we'll measure up after we put a tenon on the ends so we can go ahead and glue our box together. Got my mask and my face shield on, and we're spinning at 1100 RPM. I'm going to raise my tool rest just a little bit here. So I'll be doing this with a skew. Standard skew. Still a few edges there. Still feel a few. Let's see how we're getting cuts. See, we still have our kiln dried select maple print right there. So we're close though. Got a little showing. Let's pull out a ruler here. You guys can see right on top here. It's a pretty flat cut. I got a little dip right there. So just the blank itself wasn't perfectly around. So let's move in a little. I'm gonna raise my tool rest just a teeny bit more. Now that we're smaller, fire up and we should get that round on the next pass. Told me we were around. Got a little nick up here. We're going to be putting a 10 in there. Still a little wax. I see it's still flat in here. Didn't feel that I did. So we'll take one more pass. There we go. See, we got a pretty nice, we got a little bit of shatter right there. I think that I was loosening up a little on the tailstock side. So I'll take another pass just to get rid of that. I want to sand it out, and we still have a little wax here. But you can see our kiln dried select maple sticker is gone, and there's still just a teeny little flat here. But if we take our ruler, you can see we've got a nice flat. There's a little bow in the middle, so we'll take that out from there. It's just an anchor. Find your bevel, slowly lift your handle. Go the other direction now. Try to maintain that same height. Should be better. Yep, we got a nice flat cut now. So, Next step after getting it nice and flat and round is we're going to go ahead and put a tenon on both ends. We'll just use our skew for that as well. Just going to lay it up, find the bevel, and lift the handle. Do the same on the other end here. A little large, still fit the chucks. I'm going to take a little bit more because this will be the end of the drill. Try to slowly rotate it for a little bit of a dovetail. You don't really need a huge dovetail to make that work. But there we go. Get some nice even cuts once we get the fuzzies off. This will be our bottom, I think, and up here will be our top. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on a quick time lapse so we can do a sand on this. I'll turn on the dust collector and we'll get this fired up, and then we will go to the next step. Standard 5-inch jaws. These are the HTC 125s from Hurricane. I had a lot of people tell me I've got to try the Axe Minister Evolution Series jaws, the 114s I think they're called, that's like the best jaw they've ever heard. And other guys keep telling me, oh, why don't you have a Vic Mark? So I might look at both of those things. So our top, we want our grain, if you see that little swoop in there, from the grain pattern, I want that facing up. So this is going to be our top up here, and that'll be our bottom. Make sure we've got a little pressure in there, crank her down, and let's turn it up with about 400 RPM, 500 RPM. We're in reverse right now. Not feeling anything that's not concentric. We definitely want to have it in the final chuck before we part off the end to maintain that same concentricity. If you end up using 2 sets of chucks, sometimes there's just a little bit off, just even 5/10 thousandths can really change your parting line. So let's go ahead and get ready to part that off. Okay, we are ready to part off our top. I'm going to do just not a super deep top. We are going to have a nice little tenon in this, but I'm going to part it off right about here. And I've got it locked in tight in my jaws, still using the pressure from the tailstock over here with the live center. And once we get down to, about a 1/2 inch or so, I will go ahead and stop and I'll just part it off with the back saw. So I like to do this just right around 600-700 RPM. I'm at about 680 right now. Lock down our tool rest, our banjo. Again, it's just like finding the bevel. Figure out where you want it. Once I feel it start binding on me a little bit, I'll lower my tool rest because we're much smaller diameter in there. Make sure we have a nice, nothing too tight in there. So our grain match is not going to be perfect, but it should be pretty tight. That should be all we really have to lose there. We're going to lose a little bit for our lip, and we'll try to pull that down to look nice here. But that's kind of the idea. Now I'm going to go ahead and just use a back saw. And some of these tannings, you saw me, I started in there. Normally you'd want to use 2 runs so it doesn't bind up on you or get too hot like it just did. But I was trying to keep that grain pattern nice and tight, and probably wasn't the best move. My preference once I get small is just to use a back saw. This is a Japanese back saw, nothing super fancy. I think it was off of Amazon. And just take your time so you don't mess up your edges. And then when I start to feel it bind a little, take some pressure off. You saw it just slid right away. And that should lift right off as we back off our live center. So got a pretty good cut there. We're still gonna have to flatten that off before we get to making our lid, and I'm gonna have to flatten this off before I drill. We wanna make sure that, again, we have a knob in the middle, but we wanna make sure we don't have any dips anywhere on our outside. It looks pretty good actually, coming across, but we'll go ahead and make sure that's nice and tight, well sanded before we drill our hole, and then we will fit a little lip out here, just a little lip, so the top will fit on nice. I might go for a pop fit. To do that, you usually need at least 1/4 of an inch, but we'll see once we get there. I just want to see how the grain lines up, because we've already lost some grain there, and I still want that grain to line up real nice. It'll still be pretty either way, but that would be my preference. So I'm going to flip you guys around to the other side now, and so you can see how I flatten this off. And then this is just maple. It's kiln dried select maple. It might be a little hard, but I think we could probably do it with just 2 drill bits. And we're only going to drill down to about right here. So just dimensionally, where did Mr. Ruler go? He was just in my hand. Here we go. So we will take, here's 2 inches, so you can get an idea of how big this piece is. We'll probably go to 2.5 inches, and then we're only going to leave a 1/2 inch down at that bottom, and then our little secret compartment will be under here that we'll place in. Here's a little pro tip on drilling holes on the lathe. Make sure that you get your all the way up to your wood, set your quill dimension at 1 inch, and then lock your tailstock, because your tailstock's got just a teeny bit of play in it. That play allows it to slide back and forth. It might only be 10-15 thousandths of an inch, but it's enough to get you a non-concentric hole if you're not starting to drill that way. So I start mine 1 inch, back off my quill just a teeny bit, turn my speed on. Larger bits like this, I'm usually turning about 350 RPMs. One hand on the Jacobs chuck, and then you just slowly crank it in. And you'll see a nice concentric hole being drilled. It's 1.5 inches. So now I'm gonna back that out, turn that off, clear all my chips, return my quill all the way back to 1 inch. That way I only have the minimum amount I can extending from the end of my tailstock. So as I move my quill in, I'm keeping as much concentricity as possible. All right, there we go. We're at 1 inch on the quill. We're bottomed out in our hole. We know we have 1 inch more to go. Now 2 inches. So that's my tip on drilling holes. Hope that helps you out. Now we've got a nice little lip. The rest of our box is set in. We've got some little fuzzies up here, so we'll hit those with some 400. It's all it should probably take to get rid of those. Super light pass. Just get to the fuzzies. Well, the reason I sand this before we start to fit the lid, see all the fuzzies are gone, looks real nice. So now we're going to sand this whole outside before we fit the lid, because we don't want to have any issues with it loosening up after we sand it. I'm just saying with a little 320. Just want it to be no tear out or anything in it. So just an easy little sand. I like to round the corner over a little bit. Just sandpaper rounding, nothing fancy there. And then we can sand the inside, which is no fun to watch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys off, and we'll get that sanded, and we'll come back when we're ready to flip it around. There you go. It's ready for us to fit the lid. Make sure we're nice and tight on there. This next operation is very hairy. I'm not gonna lie. We've got a long, thin box up here, and we need to core this out here. So there's a couple ways we can do it. We can start with a small starter bit, and then just use our box scraper to go down till we get to the right dimension to seat our unit. And after that, we can just widen it till we get to that spot. But once we get there and get the right depth, and we have this inserted, we're going to glue another piece onto the top of this, and then we'll hold that on with our live center. We'll put a block of wood on this with the other piece glued on, and then we have to get it to the same dimension as the box. Another way to do that is to glue your piece on, cut it out on the bandsaw, and then sand the edges down round, or use a flush trim router bit to get around here. A couple of ways to do it, but this time I think what we're going to do is drill a pilot hole, and then we'll just widen it out with box scrapers, just cutting in easy so we can keep all of our pressure towards the headstock. But I don't think that'd be as much fun as trying to do it with the drill bit. So maybe we'll try to do it with the drill bit, see if this thing holds together. I could put the steady rest on, and I think I will, just to give us a chance of having this not bust off or go flying. So let me set up the steady rest and we'll be right back. I have a 62mm drill bit here. I happen to have one because that's the size of the clocks I make. If you guys are watching any of my clock making videos, this is the size of the engine that I use. So all we're gonna do is get up close here, make sure we're right at one inch, lock it down, full contact, back it off a 64th, turn it on, and then see if we can drill that hole without destroying our already made box. The rest of the stuff we'll have to do by hand for the fitting. I might have to put some anti-slip in there or open it up just a teeny bit, see if we get any more friction. Guess I'm gonna still can give it the shot with traditional tools. We have our ring size lined out at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and try it with some traditional tools. It's end grain, and end grain hollowing is never super easy. I do have scrapers and stuff that we can give a shot. Oops, knocked you out of there. Either way, we need a 62mm hole there to start, and then we can do the rest. So I'm gonna have to set up and do it by hand, but I'm gonna leave the steady rest on because I think this is going to go flying if we don't. But we can see we already have a friction issue. Didn't have this when I did the Bocote box, just a little different material. But I probably should have drilled this portion out first, expanded the jaws into this to hold the rest for the other hollowing. I think would probably be a better method, and I might need to redo this video to accommodate that. Let's see if we can make this work. Should have it fitted now to where we can get everything flush. So we've got our top here. I've marked off the top so we know where that is. We'll pick some feature here. Let's pick that and make sure we got that lined up well. We're going to pick this green piece here of the grain, and then we're going to sink that all the way in. We got a nice tight press fit there, as long as we're all the way in. That line right there is lining up the line here on the outside of our other edge. So we should be able to put our little part in there, and that's closed. So without any way to line up, right now this is the play inside there, which we can tighten up when we put the wood piece in. But we can pull it back to where it should be able to pull out. As long as we have it lined up right, it should lift right out. If I got it lined up right. So push down. Wow, it's such a tight puzzle box, I can't even get it open. So my fingernails, there we go. So now all we have to do is hollow out that section in there. I'll mark that out with a pencil. There we go. So we can see, oops, you can see here that we're going to just rest the edge of this part here is going to be glued in. So we can bring our box out to that edge. I like to go just a little bit past where that pencil line is. So far that seems to have been the best. So I'm going to go back to hollowing out to that line for the depth of our little hidden compartment. Like we're not hiding, you know, cougar ends down here, although it is big enough for one maybe. You could hide one cougar end in the bottom of your box, fill the rest with jelly beans, and hope your thief doesn't like jelly beans. So I'll hollow that and bring it back when we're ready to glue it together. And again, so once we get the lid on there, haha, once we've glued up our wood on here, just so you've got a spot down there, you can put, you know, some special papers, some jewels, like I said, maybe some gold bullion, maybe your top secret spyware thumb drive, and all fit in there to be perfectly hidden. So now what we'll do is we're going to make a little recess along the edge here, and we're going to glue a piece of maple to that, and we're going to get it set in, and then we'll set our combination based on a piece of grain out here that will line those two things up so we know where it is. And we'll make a texture on this to make it easier to spin, because right now, see, we could spin it, and now there's no way for it to lock out, but it rattles. We don't want any rattling at all. So we don't want that rattle when our someone picks up the box, because that'll let them know there's something hidden in there. So I think we had it on right up in here, and then just a little to the side here. Boom. There it is. So now let's glue up our laminate on this and get our base set up, and it should be ready to go. Done all the fitting. We've got our ring inserted, and you can see I marked off the bottom there where the two outside edges are, just so we have a good idea of where we're lining things up. So when we do our little combination, I cut out a medallion out of some maple I milled. So it's just offcut scrap medallion, and obviously traced the outside of our insert. So I'm going to glue the two of those together, and then I'm going to mount it in the lathe and trim it down to shape. We should be able to lock it between these two with the pin jaws and get a nice perfect fit to fit on that outside rim. And then we'll sand it flush and we should be ready to go. Okay, so now that we've got everything kind of where we want it in terms of that, I'm just going to put a few drops. I put 4 little spots here, little accelerator in there, and we're going to press this in. Now we don't need to get our ring lined up perfectly with our bottom down there. Oops, what happened? There we go. Because we can sand that off and draw in a new one. But we just want to get that firmly in place so if someone's pulling on it too hard, it doesn't come flying out at you. So I will go ahead and sand that off real quick, other knots, and then we'll take a ruler and we'll actually mark it out before we do the next phase here. So let's get, I'm just going to grab a little 320, it's just pencil marks, and then we'll flip it around and I'll work the top up for you and show you how I'm doing that. Again, I'm sorry this has been kind of a clunky, longer video trying to explain how this thing works. It was a lot easier when I just did it without talking. And of course, I go to make a second video so I can explain it again. And nothing's going quite as smoothly as it did the first time. Each piece of wood's different, man. That's just kind of one of the challenges and the fun things about working on the lathe with timber. You know, the Bacote was really hard to hollow, but it was super easy to do the fitting, and everything was just like precision. It was almost like machining aluminum. Where on this go around with this maple, moves a little bit more, a little bit wobblier, a little more forgiving, a little softer. So there's a few challenges there. So obviously, if you were going to try to batch a bunch of these for show or something, there's a lot of things you'd want to take into consideration. Like if I was doing this, if I had to make 10 or 15 of these, I'd probably batch them out, and I'd do the bottom first, and then make sure I could have a big enough jaws to grab the outside. Or I might even make some sort of special chuck setup for that, or even if you had a vacuum chuck, that'd be ideal. But I'm going to figure something out to make it a little easier in the long run. But for now, I'm going to take off my steady rest, clean up the outside here. You can see it's got a little mark from where the wheels rolled on it. And then we'll move to the fitting that lid perfectly inside this insert. Okay, I've got the base now glued up to that maple like I showed you earlier, and this bottom. I'm going to flatten that top off. It should be pretty flat then. And then I will slowly bring it in. Obviously, we're going to just do some sanding near the end because this is right up on the edge. And maybe I could put a spacer in there to bump it out just a teeny bit. That might be a smart move. Let me see if I can find a spacer just so we can get like 1/2 millimeter extra. All right, let me get a face mask on. I don't want to nick my jaws, but there is an opportunity there to nick the jaws. Grab a face mask. So once we have the outside mostly done, we should be able to flip it around, put it in the jaws without damaging it, and then clean up the other edge. I have in my hand, still using the carbides. Stop a bit and just see where we're at. Got a ways to go still. A little back and forth here. Now, one of the things we can do while we have it here, it's a little bit more trouble, but we can see how we're fitting. You know, we're still quite a ways off. I haven't marked out that other wall thickness out here. I probably should have drew a circle on both sides, but we do know, you know, where we have to go, so we'll just keep fitting it like that. It fits, but it's a little smaller than I wanted, but we have the other end up here, so what we can do is flip it around now and use this in the jaws and clean it down to this. Okay, spaced it out, got it round. Now it's back to trying to fit it on the back here. Oops, of course my glue. And what to do? So all we have to do is see if it'll drop in this way, and look how close that fit is. So we could probably crunch fit that, but then it'd be really hard to get it out. So at this point, all we have to do is sand the edges until we get a nice fit, and we're almost there. Almost there. I don't think we can even remount it back on the lathe and get any closer. If I had a jaw that I could, a pin jaw, that opened up big enough that would hold this back here, I'd probably do that, and then I could sand this and continue to taper. But this is all of the wood that we're actually going to use on the bottom. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and peel off that top portion there. That'll be our next job, is to flatten that out a bit. Make sure that it's in there nice and tight without crushing anything. Now I'm going to come across here. This is face grain, so I should be able to just use a bowl gouge to do that. So this is not a final fit, remember that. This is just a shaping and sizing so we can get it to there before we sand it, flush with the bottom. So if we come up here, get things lined up okay. Fits in just like that. So now all we have to do is come up with how we want to line up the grain and where we're going to put our marks. I put a little dimple in here that looks like a chip that I was going to use as my main point to line things up with. And I need to put a little relief in here so you get your fingers under it. Obviously it could sit like this with a shadow line and it'd be nice and flat, but I think having it all the way flat would make a slightly better look, and we can sand that once we get everything else positioned properly. So I'm going to take a little bit more off the edge just so we have a fit we can get out with a fingernail, and I'll put a fingernail or a small relief in here that we can get into. Might even just do it with a drill bit. Okay, we've got it. I had to actually tape a little block on here so that when you're looking at it, we can figure out how to line it up and get enough pressure to do it. And I have found, if I get the right piece of grain here lined up. So there's a piece of grain right there. It goes into that little dent to line us up perfectly. And I'm going to pick one of these other grains down here and make a little notch so that we know it's an exact lineup. Just going to get right on the edge there. Just a little tap. Just want to line. And it lines up with that piece of grain. So now we know we can lift the top off when those things are together, and it'll twist to lock. Now it won't open. Come back around, line up our grain. Make sure we're on the right grain. It's that one right there. So somehow we need to make a mark where that grain is telling us that we've got everything lined up perfectly. And then we'll have to decorate over it to kind of hide it a little bit. So I'm coming into the edge over here now and just rolling my chisel into the side. Nothing really sharp, but I have that one little line there now. It goes right into the grain. It tells us we can take our lid off. And when I line that up again and turn it around, our bottom is locked. So the problem is, let's go and peel our little spot off here, is you have to be able to turn this by hand, and we probably need to put a little texture on it or something for that, so you can get some friction. Or you have to hold it upside down and let gravity help you move it around. But right now, without any pressure on it, it's really hard to get it to turn, to line up our grain and pull it out. So we need to come up with a little system there that makes that a little easier. But you get the idea of how it works and how there's a bunch of ways you can decorate it. Now I'm going to probably decorate this bottom here. Since we know we can just line that up, I'll probably put a spiral on the bottom or something to cover up that mess, so you have to know what you're looking for to actually open it up. And I got also, I'll get it just right here. See, it's not just right, it ain't gonna work. And then a little twist of the knob and now it won't go. A little twist back, especially if our hands are a little sticky, works better. Just licked my thumbs and it worked. There we go. Ta-da. So that's the idea, that's the concept. I'll keep refining it, and when I've got a little better process together, maybe we'll reshare. But for now, you can kind of see how we can use this to give ourselves a little kind of secret combination. If we lined everything up with the grain, like if you cut off a piece of the grain on the bottom, like I did on the Bacote version, so I split it twice and then inlaid that so the grain matched, then I just matched up all the grain and it worked. But until then, I think we've got a pretty good setup right now. And I'll go ahead and finish this off, and we'll bring you back at the end. Well, there it is, all wrapped up. Got our little canister. I went and decorated the lid. Just a little texture and a couple of beads. Made a knob out of the leftover tenon. And we still have our little box in there. And of course, we have our secret compartment in the bottom. So if we turn off our little wiggly thing here, there we go. And we wet our fingers a little bit so we have some little bit of friction. We can come around, line up our two little nuts, lines with the grain, and boom. Secret compartment's open. So again, you can do all sorts of stuff with the concept, and this is obviously not a perfect box. We had some slippage in here with the chuck jaws that left a ring that I didn't sand out yet. But all in all, you kind of get the idea. A few little pieces, a little bit of patience, and you can make your own little secret hidden box thing. If you guys are interested in that little 3D printed part down there, just drop me a line, give me a DM, and I'll get with you, share the file. Have a great day, guys. Get out there and turn something.